Yeah, action and reaction from Anfield and the rest of the day's Premier League action to come. Welcome along, Asmir, Michael, Mark. Only one place to start, though. With less than 24 hours to go, Mark, the transfer window clock is ticking. Alexander Isak is still a Newcastle player.
Yeah.
Will he be come tomorrow night?
It's a multi-million-dollar question. It's great to see this. Less than a day to go.
Yes.
It's been a long summer, but there's been no doubt about the big talking point, the saga, the main transfer that everyone wants to know about. It's probably the same for you. It's probably the same for you, Michael. People stop you in the street, and even if they're not a Newcastle or Liverpool fan, they want to know what's happening with Alexander Isak. 43 days ago, Alexander Isak said to Newcastle United, "I want to explore my opportunities this summer. I'm open to leaving Newcastle United." But right now, with less than 24 hours to go, we're still no closer to an answer as to whether he's going to get his desire and wish to move. We know the only club in town at this stage is Liverpool. We know that they've had an offer that's been rejected, which we understand to be 110 million plus. There has been this figure of 150 million placed upon his head, but we know that Liverpool are going to get nowhere near that. In fact, any potential second offer, if there is to be a second offer, is probably likely to be very similar to their initial offer. Last season, no question about Newcastle's star man, 26 goals and 6 assists in all competitions. He's a player that Eddie Howe doesn't want to leave St James's Park. He's a player that's absolutely crucial to their Premier League and Champions League campaign. I think the big thing is that Alexander Isak, with 24 hours to go, feels confident that he'll get his wish. He believes the stars will align and his desire to go to the Premier League champions will be fulfilled. But that requires 2 conditions. A, Liverpool pay what Newcastle are happy with. And B, Newcastle, in theory, are comfortable with the striking options they have at the club. They've obviously brought in one striker, Nick Voldemada, who's obviously going to be a brilliant prospect. But is that enough to go into a Premier League season? Does Eddie Howe say, no, we need strength in depth in that position? And that may be a huge factor in what happens to Alexander Isak.
But they've had 2 away games so far this season. They've not scored. And the simple fact is, if they had Alexander Isak on that pitch, they probably would have won those games. Now, Villa and Leeds fans might not like me saying that, but that's probably the view of Newcastle fans, isn't it?
Well, he was instrumental last season. He was one of those players that could pull something out the bag at the last moment. He was always a constant threat. He was always in and around the box where he'd come alive and make things happen. 23 goals. And he's one of those players that you just know that he can do something special. That's why he's rated at £100+ million. That's why he's been linked with the Premier League champions. That is why he is on the radar of a club like Liverpool, who have very few attacking options themselves. And I guess as a goalkeeper, Asmir, he's probably one player you don't want to face because of that quality he possesses.
No, you don't. And I think it's a case of if Liverpool do get Alexander Isak, then you really see it difficult to stop them, especially with the result today. They sent another message by beating Arsenal. You know, it's going to be a big signing for them. But being Newcastle, and especially a team like Newcastle who are competing at that upper end of the league and have got Champions League football, European football to come, you can't leave yourself with no strikers going into games. Now, I understand these circumstances are difficult, so Voldemade coming in is a good step in the right direction. But I still think they either need to keep Isak or replace Isak with someone else. And I know it's been the case of Yoan Wissa. Is he going to be able to come in? So I still think there's a few dominoes to sort out.
We'll come to those potential replacements in just a moment. But Asmir, look, it seems like we've been speaking about Isak from the very start of this transfer window, and with less than 24 hours to go, we're still talking about Alexander Isak. It's the big question that has been asked, that if he doesn't make that move, will he be welcomed back? But if he does make that move, what message do you think that would send if he was to get that move, given he's given all these statements saying, oh, there were these promises that were reneged upon? From a player's perspective, how do you see this saga?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really difficult to speak from the outside looking in. You never know what's happened behind the scenes at that football club, who said what. I think promises are really a difficult thing to hang your hat on because people leave clubs, decision makers leave clubs, so certain people making you promises. I think the only promise you have is what's written in your contract. So I think as players, you do have a bit of sympathy and understanding of these situations can be very difficult. Of course, everyone would love these things sorted sooner. You want it sorted before pre-season, so you have all of pre-season to bet in new players and build that camaraderie. So I think for everyone, it's a very difficult situation. I think they'll be looking at this clock and can't wait for the window to be over and then know which players are there, which players they can count on, who's in for the battle ahead.
Have you got any previous stories of a player who, at the clubs you were at, and there was a player who wanted to leave, they didn't get their move? Are they back in the changing room? They're like, "You all right? Can we be friends again?"
You do have that. I mean, I had a move that went to deadline day. It can be difficult. You have it every summer, every single January. There's players who want to leave, supposed to leave, don't leave, held out of training or not training. It's a very unsettling period for everyone. So you do get it, but I think once the window shuts, listen, we're professionals at the end of the day. The business side is the business side. That's over now. And then once the window shuts, you carry on with your work.
As a player, do you totally understand it? Do you welcome him back and say, look, in that dressing room, in that space, we're all the same. We're all footballers. We all have ambitions. We all want to earn more money. We all want to play maybe for bigger clubs. Not that I'm saying Liverpool's a bigger club than Newcastle, but do you almost just forget the window the moment the following day happens?
Yeah, Mark, you really do. You really do. I mean, the business side really takes over in these 2 or 3 months in the summer, January. So there's so many things that go on behind the scenes that you do understand. For a player, it's difficult. Obviously, he's had conversations with Newcastle, promises have been made. He's had conversations with Liverpool. He knows what contract's on the table. He knows the difference in finances. And you have to show sympathy for players. It's a short career. There's certain things on the line, and he's obviously looking out for what's best for him and his family. Now, of course, there's a professional duty as well to play for the club you're contracted to, but there's also instructions from the club sometimes to stay back and not train and not play, to make sure that he keeps his value and doesn't jeopardise any transfer either.
Asmir, you say it's a short career, and just picking up on the question Mark asked you there, is it almost a different attitude almost that the fans would have towards a player who's in this position and in the confines of the dressing room and what the players will think of the player?
Of course, I think the fans are very, very passionate about their football clubs. There's no doubt about that. And again, from the outside looking in, you only know so much. So you can never have a full understanding of a situation. You can never really form a full opinion on these situations until you know all of the information. So I think teammates, players inside that dressing room will know a lot more. Maybe not 100% of details, but certainly know a lot more. So you can have a bit more understanding of a certain situation. And that's why I understand the fans' frustration, because they won't know everything. They can only see a player, it seems like he's choosing not to play, and for them, they're going to take it personal because it's their club they love and it's the club they support, whereas actually there's probably a lot more things going on behind the scenes.
In Alexander Isak's statement, he said that promises were reneged upon. Newcastle United said no. They also said that the conditions and the terms of a deal have not been met. So by definition, there are conditions and terms. One of them, and you touched on it before, Mark, was getting in replacements. Now, Asmir talked about the promises that Alexander Isak believes he had. Yoan Wissa is saying the same thing, but he said something different in his statement today, didn't he? Because he says that was in writing.
Yes, allegedly the agreement that he had with Brentford about leaving this summer was in writing. And Yoan Wissa is another player that's put a quite lengthy statement out on his social media accounts today to explain the situation. He starts off by saying, look, I've been pretty silent on this whole saga, but now I feel like it's time to put my side across and tell people exactly how I feel and what I think. One of the key things I noticed from the statement was he said, it was confirmed to me and my representatives that the club would not stand in my way when a reasonable offer was received. Now, straight away you go, well, what's a reasonable offer? Brentford star man, someone that was a huge part of their side last season, got 2 years left on his contract, 1 plus a club option second year. That's worth, 50, 60, 70 million in this current summer with the prices that have been bandied around for players. So is 35 million a reasonable offer? Newcastle would argue, well, actually, this is a player that's got 1 year left on his contract with a club option. He's going to be 29 years old soon. We can offer him Champions League football. The player wants to come to us, and the player's been told that he could leave this summer for the right price. So therefore, you look at both sides of it and you can completely understand why they're at a stalemate and they can't make any progress on this particular type of deal. So that's one potential player that could be heading to the northeast. But at this stage, based on all the information we know, it certainly feels unlikely that Yoan Wissa is going to end up playing for Eddie Howe.
Yeah, it's interesting because part of that statement, he wouldn't go into the actual price that he was promised that Brentford would sell him for. One source, and I should reiterate, it's just one source here. We were told at Sky Sports News that maybe it was around the 40 to 45 million euro mark earlier on this year that he was promised. Newcastle United, we think, bid 40 plus 5, a 45 million pound package. We think Brentford want a lot more than that because they haven't themselves managed to find a replacement. Where is this going to end? Do we think with, 23 hours and a bit to go, that everyone stays put as it stands?
You look at this situation and Alexander Isak, statements on social media, unhappiness, agitating for a move, you've made me promises, you've not kept them, I'm unhappy. Very similar situation with Yoan Wissa. Maybe there'll be three other players. Kobbie Mainoo's been a player that's been spoken about potentially leaving, whereas Manchester United's stance has been, no, you're going to stay and fight for your place. The one thing we do know is that not every player will get their desire. There will be players that have agitated very publicly for a move during this summer, and they're not going to get their wishes. So they're going to have to stay put, go back between, with the tail between the legs in the dressing room and say, right, guys, let's focus on the next 6 months. I'm in the fold. I'm a part of this. Let's go and get some results.
The fact that these statements have come out, Asmir, just before we go to, I know we're going to go to some action from Liverpool Arsenal in a moment, but the fact that they brought out these statements, one, Isak was, 12 days before the window closed. We've got Yoan Wissa releasing a statement on the eve of deadline day. Is it almost an act of desperation at that stage? Because until Monday, 7 p.m, they feel that they can engineer or have an impact on that move. Because once it hits 7 p.m. tomorrow, the music stops, doesn't it? And if they're still at their clubs, get used to it.
Absolutely right. And it's one of those things where a player only has so much power. And I think there's only so many things you can do. Obviously now he's voiced his opinion publicly. It's an element of pressure. You can apply it to the situation. But as a player, it's so difficult because these decisions get made by people above you. You don't have all the power, all the control of the situation. Obviously, by making a statement, he feels really strong about the situation, about what's been said, what's been done. And I think, like I said, I think the window being over tomorrow, so many people will be relieved. And I think the domino effect is the biggest problem here, because even if Wissa does go to Newcastle, they want to let him go. Who's the replacement for Brentford? So it's this domino effect, and I think with time running out, it's going to be very difficult to find a solution to all these problems. One
of the problems as well is that you get to this stage in the window and the price tag changes. You get this business done 6 weeks ago, there's a certain price tag. OK, fine, that allows us time to find a replacement. But when you get to this stage, and we know that in this particular summer there's a real lack of strikers available on the market that are Premier League ready, it makes those situations almost impossible to solve. And that's the problem that Newcastle have had. They've gone into the window, they've been rejected by a couple of players, they've been linked with a couple more players. I think they've got an excellent player in Nick Voldemade, who could be a real star in the Premier League. But outside of someone like him, there are very few options for Brentford or Newcastle, and it makes it tough.
He looks great, don't get me wrong. But when that Champions League draw came out the other day, as exciting as it is, when these games start, and I know I keep saying it on this show, Saturday, Tuesday, Sunday, Wednesday, you need a big squad. You will need a big squad. So if Alexander Isak is going to stay at Newcastle United, gone are the days of rotting the reserves. That's gone. That's 90s talk. He will have to get back in that squad.
And I guess maybe to finish this conversation, Alexander Isak is a top player. He's an asset for Newcastle. He's a business asset on the pitch, and he's a business asset off the pitch. And Eddie Howe will want him to stay. At the start of the window, Eddie Howe had a plan to play Alexander Isak alongside Hugo Ekitike. Hugo wasn't brought in as an Isak replacement. It turns out that he probably would have been one, but Newcastle's initial plan was to play both of them. And the fact that Voldemade has come in, that doesn't necessarily mean that Isak is off, because Eddie will have a plan. I've got two top strikers, which is what we need. So therefore, Newcastle's stance will be, we'll sell him at the right price. But the manager wants strength in depth, he wants quality, and he wants a player who he's now got that can push Isak to say, you're not guaranteed to start if you're still here. Got a really good young 23-year-old German international that can come and take your place. So you've got to be on it in training and on a Saturday.